Hi, and welcome to the MyConsultant.ca Show. I'm Sarah Ostapchuk,
And I'm Adrian Quijano.
and we're here to help you with the Canadian immigration process. This show is designed to be a brief way to inform you on Canadian immigration news headlines, immigration policy and program concepts, and introduce you to industry experts.
Today's show is going to include meaningful employment for Afghans, ExpressEntry, FSWP and CEC pathways, immigration inspiration profiles, and CICC's final anti-fraud tips. Our first headline today, finding meaningful employment for Afghan refugees. ACES, or ACCES Employment, is a service provider organization in the Greater Toronto Area. It is a leader in connecting job seekers from diverse backgrounds with employers such as Maple Leaf Foods, CGI, and Rogers, who have all stepped up to support Afghan refugees. ACES offers mentoring support, translation and language support, job search workshops, including resume writing and interview preparation, work placements, and onboarding and post-hire support. To date, ACES has held 7 virtual job fairs, working with Afghan refugees to explore their work interests and where they want to settle. Through one-on-one virtual conversations with prospective employers, many Afghan newcomers have been able to follow up on interviews and have received job offers. Expanding their reach beyond the Greater Toronto Area, ACES is beginning to work with Talent Pool in Calgary to deliver larger scale fairs across Canada. They've also teamed up with IKEA Canada to launch a national customer experience training program.
So, Adrian, you might remember, I think it might have been last week or maybe the week before, you were asking about the other pathways that are available through ExpressEntry. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about PNPs, provincial nominee programs, because that's been almost exclusively how invitations are sent through ExpressEntry. But there are others, such as the FSWP and CEC. I will tell you what those acronyms mean. So yeah, we've got word that these 2 pathways may resume sometime this year. So they've been paused during the pandemic and they may be resumed soon. So the federal high skilled category includes the Federal Skilled Worker Program, FSWP, and the Canadian Experience Class, the CEC. So those 2 are under federal high skilled. And so immigrants are sent invites within these pathways through ExpressEntry normally. But during the pandemic, the IRCC temporarily paused the FSW and FST, which is another subcategory, intake to focus on CEC and PNP. And that was in order to meet the 2021 immigration goals. So the IRCC is expected to give information soon. They said March 2022. However, that is very quickly closing.
Yes.
So in the near future, we'll hear about the reopening of these streams, hopefully through ExpressEntry, but they will continue to do bi-weekly PNP draws. And their new plans will align with the goals laid out in the 2022-2024 immigration levels plan, which is something that was shared with us, I think, last month, and we went over that. So when they're pausing and focusing on certain streams, it might seem random and it might seem a little frustrating for people who are maybe focused on one stream rather than the other, but it is to most strategically meet the goals of the immigration plan for that year.
Right.
So Adrian, what are you covering this week for your segment?
So this week, I'm really excited to say that I'm going to be looking at immigration stories, specifically immigrant stories from folks who've moved to Canada a couple of years back. One story is called The Angel of the North, and we're going to be looking at a doctor who is on her 3rd generation of babies that she's delivered, which is amazing. Yeah. And then another story that I'm going to be looking at is how small businesses are actually growing through immigration, which is really exciting.
That is, and that's important to know, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and following that, I will be wrapping up our anti-fraud month of March with some last tips from the CICC, just questions that you should ask your consultant that you're thinking of hiring in your consultation. But first, let's check out Adrian's segment.
Today we'll be looking at inspirational stories about folks who have immigrated to Canada. Their full articles can be found on the CICC website. Our first story is on Dr. Leita Malhorta, who was originally from India and has delivered over 10,000 babies in Canada. She is currently based in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and has lived in Canada since 1975. Her strong connections with the local Indigenous community have earned her the title the Angel of the North within her community. She takes an anti-colonial approach to her medical practice and makes folks feel comfortable in her office. She is now on her third generation of babies being delivered, and she is currently working with a doctor whom she delivered decades ago. Next, we'll be taking a look at growing local businesses through immigration. Friesen's Printing Company became a large employer of immigrants in Alberta. In Altona, Manitoba, where one of their plants are located, immigrants make up 15% of the population. About 1/6 of their total employees are immigrants, many coming from the Philippines, Mexico, and India. At Friesen's, they try to ensure that their employees are paid properly and given what they need to not only survive in Canada, but thrive. Now on to Sarah with her story.
For our final segment to round off Fraud Prevention Month in March, we're going to discuss some questions you can and should ask an immigration consultant that you want to hire. First things first, always check if the immigration consultant you're thinking of hiring is licensed before accepting their services. You can do this by going to the public register webpage on the CICC website. On this webpage, you enter in their name, RCIC number, status, and company name to verify them. Once you've done that, you can set up a consultation over the phone, virtually, or in person. Remember that most consultants will charge a fee for an initial consultation. Make sure you ask lots of questions during this consultation. Here are some examples. What work will you do? Your consultant should give you a service agreement that lists the services you'll pay for and what they cost. If anything is unclear about the agreement, clarify it with them now. Number 2, how experienced are you? How long they've been licensed and their specializations are of interest to you if you're planning on hiring them. Experience they have with your specific type of case and info about the case is also really important. Do they know the ins and outs of your major concerns? This is an essential question to ask if you have a case that might be more challenging than most. Number 3, can you still help if I have been refused in the past? It is important to be honest with your consultant. Tell them why you were refused, and they may be able to offer you different strategies going forward. You don't want to repeat the same mistakes you made previously and get the same result. Number 4, can you help me find a job? Some consultants will help with this, and sometimes you have to go to a separate recruiter to find a job. Number 5, who will help with my application? Other people will likely be helping with your file. Ask your consultant the names of your primary contacts so that you can understand their credentials and know who you need to talk to about specific things in your application. Number 6, how do you set your fees? The fees may be based on their experience level, how complicated your case is, and how many people will be working on it. And this can definitely vary depending on the case. Remember that the CICC does not regulate how much consultants charge for their services, so it is your responsibility to consider the fairness of the price. Number 7, can I pay you by the hour? Some consultants charge an hourly rate. If they do, they must outline how much they charge in the service agreement and give you an estimate of how many hours your case will take. Number 8, do I have to pay in advance for all applications? You should not have to pay in advance for an application that requires the approval of another application. Your consultant should give you a list of all applications you will have to fill out and their cost. Number 9, will you refund my money if I cancel my contract? If your application has already been submitted, it may not be fair to ask for a refund. If it has not yet been submitted, you may be able to ask for a refund. Number 10, do you receive a commission from the businesses or schools that you work with? The Code of Professional Conduct outlines that consultants have to tell you if they are receiving benefits from someone else working on your application. And that wraps up our anti-fraud month of March. We hope you learned a lot about how to avoid fraud, and we hope that these segments will help you make informed decisions moving forward as you come to Canada and settle into Canada. Now let's rejoin Adrian to wrap up the show.
So that was a lot of really interesting tips, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we spent so much time on anti-fraud this month. And it makes me think about previous generations of people coming to Canada who did not have the same amount of access to trusted licensed consultants like we do now, which is great. Like, I think we're both children of immigrants. And when they came to Canada, they would have had to do things a lot more on their own. I don't know
Right.
about you.
It's definitely a different world than when my parents started, like here in Canada, because my folks, they moved here 96.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they lived in the GTA in Toronto, because that's where a lot of immigrants go, because that's where the jobs are, especially in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
What about your parents? Did they?
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting you say that because that would have been just before you were born, right?
Yes, 2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was born in 96. My dad actually, it's actually not my parents that I think about as immigrants, but my grandparents.
Mhm.
So my dad technically was born in Trinidad, but he came with his family when he was 1 to Canada. So he's quite Canadianized.
Right.
And on my mom's side, they're like a millionth generation Canadian. So their family's been here for a long time. But yeah, they actually were initially going to end up in Alberta, I think. My grandfather had a job offer, but they had to connect in Toronto, and they ended up staying here. So I would have had a very different upbringing.
Yeah.
They decided to continue on. So
A
yeah.
similar thing actually happened with my family because
Hmm.
some of my relatives moved to Calgary 2 decades before my dad moved here when
Hmm.
he was a young man, and they moved to Calgary too. And he initially stayed with them when they were still getting all of his affairs in order, and then he eventually moved to Toronto to meet up with my mom, who was coming from the States.
That's really interesting, though. I always like hearing about people's stories of their parents or themselves coming to Canada. So I think we would be called second generation.
I guess it's really up to you. I mean, do you identify as a second generation Canadian?
I mean, I don't even know what does that look like? I don't know. I think I do.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you for joining us this week. Be sure to click the bell icon and subscribe to the My Consultant channel. For more information about the topics covered in this show, please visit MyConsultant.ca, where you can contact an authorized immigration consultant and citizenship consultant. I'm Adrian Quijano,
And I'm Sarah Ostapchuk.
and we'll see you next week.
Bye.